Have you ever seen a NASCAR team owner become so furious that he publicly accused one of the sport's biggest stars of intentionally taking out his driver? Because that's exactly what happened after Chicagoland. Richard Childress didn't hold back. Moments after Austin Hill's race ended in a controversial incident with Shane van Gisbergen, Richard Childress made an accusation that immediately sent shockwaves through the NASCAR garage. According to him, this wasn't just another racing incident. He believed it was payback, deliberate payback. But was Shane van Gisbergen really settling an old score? Or did one aggressive battle simply go wrong at the worst possible time? We're going to break down exactly what happened, why Richard Childress is convinced it wasn't an accident, what Austin Hill had to say afterward, and why this incident has everyone debating where NASCAR should draw the line. So make sure you stay with us until the very end. Let's get into it. Coming into Chicagoland, Shane van Gisbergen was once again one of the biggest names everyone was watching. His road course success has turned him into one of the most talked about drivers in NASCAR. And every time the series heads to a track where braking, corner entry, and racecraft matter, expectations immediately rise. Austin Hill, meanwhile, was trying to put together another solid run and avoid the kind of trouble that can ruin an afternoon in seconds. Instead, both drivers became the center of the biggest controversy of the race. The incident happened during an intense battle when the two cars came together entering the corner. Van Gisbergen's car made contact with Hill, sending the Richard Childress Racing driver around and ending any chance he had of salvaging a strong finish. At first glance, it looked like another hard racing incident. But this time, the conversation didn't end there. Within moments of the crash, Richard Childress was already convinced there was more to it than simply hard racing. Over the team radio, Richard Childress didn't hide what he believed had just happened. He said, "That was payback. That was blatant. Somebody talked to NASCAR." Those comments immediately changed the entire conversation. Instead of debating whether the contact was simply a racing incident, people started asking a much bigger question. Did Shane van Gisbergen intentionally wreck Austin Hill? That's a serious accusation, especially coming from someone with Richard Childress' experience. When he speaks that strongly, people pay attention. But why was Richard Childress so convinced? The answer goes back to what happened before Chicagoland. The relationship between Austin Hill and Shane van Gisbergen had already become tense after their previous run in earlier this season. That earlier incident left frustration on both sides, and many inside the garage wondered whether the rivalry was completely over. Richard Childress clearly doesn't believe it was. From his perspective, what happened at Chicagoland looked less like an accident and more like unfinished business. In his eyes, SVG saw an opportunity and took it. Whether that's actually true is another question entirely, because when you watch the replay, opinions quickly become divided. Some fans believed SVG simply raced aggressively into the corner, while others agreed with Richard Childress that the move looked too deliberate to be a coincidence. That's exactly why this story has exploded across the NASCAR community. Everyone sees the replay a little differently. Austin Hill wasn't exactly in the mood to let things go after climbing from his car either. Still frustrated, Hill mocked Van Gisbergen's name during his post-race comments, referring to him as Van Guggenheim, or however you say his last name, making it clear there was no love lost between the two drivers. That remark quickly spread across social media, adding even more fuel to an already heated debate. Instead of calming the situation, emotions only continued to rise, and now the pressure had shifted onto NASCAR. If this was simply hard racing, officials could move on without much discussion. But if there was even the slightest indication that the contact was intentional retaliation, then the sanctioning body would have a much bigger decision to make. NASCAR has always encouraged hard racing, but intentional retaliation is a completely different matter. That's why this incident immediately drew so much attention. The difficult part for NASCAR is that intent is one of the hardest things to prove. NASCAR can review every replay and every piece of data, but proving what a driver intended is much harder than proving what actually happened. That's why incidents like this often divide the garage. One side sees aggressive racing, the other sees deliberate retaliation. And this time, there were respected voices on both sides of the argument. Those are words that immediately put both NASCAR and Shane van Gisbergen under the spotlight. As fans continued debating the replay, another question started to emerge. Could SVG have avoided the contact? Some analysts argued that a driver as skilled as SVG could have avoided the contact. Others believed both drivers were fighting for the same piece of track, making the contact almost unavoidable. That's the challenge with incidents like this. A single replay rarely settles the debate. Instead, everyone watches it through their own perspective. But because Richard Childress immediately connected this crash to the previous incident between Hill and Van Gisbergen, the conversation became much bigger than one corner at Chicagoland. Now people weren't just talking about what happened. They were asking why it happened. That changed everything. One important detail is that Shane van Gisbergen never publicly admitted to any intentional retaliation. There has been no evidence proving that he deliberately turned Austin Hill. Without that evidence, Richard Childress's comments remain exactly what they are, an accusation. It's a serious accusation, but without evidence of intent, it's still only an accusation. NASCAR cannot issue penalties based on assumptions or emotions alone. If officials believe the contact falls within normal racing standards, then the incident is likely to stay exactly where it is, in the category of hard racing. If they believe there was clear intent, that's when the conversation changes. For now, that evidence simply hasn't been made public. Even so, this controversy probably isn't disappearing anytime soon. Drivers have long memories. Owners have even longer ones. The next time Shane van Gisbergen and Austin Hill find themselves racing around each other, everyone will be paying close attention. Not because of what happened at Chicagoland alone, but because of everything that's been said since. Richard Childress believes his driver was intentionally wrecked. Austin Hill is still frustrated, and fans remain divided over what really happened. Regardless of which side you're on, this has become one of the biggest controversies of the weekend. And in NASCAR, controversies like this have a way of following drivers long after the checkered flag falls. Now the question shifts from what happened to what happens next. One thing is for sure. The next time Shane van Gisbergen and Austin Hill are battling for the same piece of racetrack, nobody will be watching the leaders. They'll be watching those too. Because after everything that's happened and everything that's been said, the spotlight is already waiting for the next round.